The rain had not stopped all night. It fell in restless sheets against the glass towers of the city, washing the sidewalks in silver light, drumming softly against the roof of Ethan Carter's car as he drove through the sleeping streets. The world outside looked blurred, as though the night itself wanted to erase everything sharp and leave only shadows. Ethan sat behind the wheel of his black Tesla, the engine humming almost inaudibly. To anyone else, it would have been the perfect ending to a day, a billionaire heading home from yet another victory in the boardroom. His company, Carter Dynamics, had just closed one of the biggest acquisitions in its history. The press had been all over it, journalists calling it a masterstroke, investors calling it another Carter miracle. But Ethan felt nothing. He loosened the collar of his suit and leaned back, one hand tightening on the steering wheel. Success, once electric, now felt like an old song played too many times, the tune still perfect, but lifeless. His phone buzzed on the console beside him, endless congratulations flooding in. He ignored them all. Some nights, he drove aimlessly like this, through streets where no one expected to see him, searching for something he couldn't name. The rain gave him cover. It dulled the noise of his own thoughts. Tonight, it was under a flickering street lamp that he saw her. At first, she was just another figure in the rain, slouched on the bench of a half-broken bus stop. A thin blanket clung to her shoulders, soaked through, plastered against her skin. Her hair, dark and tangled, dripped water down her cheeks, but her face was calm, unnervingly still, as though she wasn't waiting for a bus, or for anything at all. Ethan's car slowed without him realizing it. His eyes locked on her. There was something different, not the sight of poverty, which he'd seen before, but the silence in her posture. She wasn't begging. She wasn't even moving. She sat as though the rain didn't matter, as though the world had already left her behind. He should have kept driving. Billionaires didn't stop on empty streets for strangers. But his chest tightened with a strange, unwelcome pull, and before he could argue with himself, he had already parked by the curb. The rain hit him in full force the moment he stepped out. It soaked his shirt in seconds, but he walked toward her anyway, shoes splashing in shallow puddles. The girl didn't move. "Hey," Ethan said, his voice deeper than he intended. She glanced up at him slowly, her eyes dark and sharp despite the shadows. He expected fear, or hope, or even recognition. Instead, he saw indifference, the kind that slices deeper than hatred. He cleared his throat. "It's freezing out here. You shouldn't be." "Where else should I be?" she cut in softly, her voice carrying under the rain. Ethan hesitated. He wasn't used to being interrupted. He wasn't used to people speaking to him as if he were anyone else. He studied her face, the hollow beneath her cheekbones, the faint tremor in her hands beneath the soaked blanket. Something about the sight unsettled him, not her condition, but the calm with which she carried it. Without thinking twice, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. He thumbed through crisp bills, pulled out a thick wad, and extended it toward her. "Take it," he said firmly. "Get yourself somewhere warm tonight." For the first time, she moved. Her eyes dropped to the money, lingered there, then lifted back to his face. Her expression didn't change. Slowly, deliberately, she pushed his hand away. Ethan froze. "No," she said. The single word carried more weight than any rejection he had ever known. Ethan blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. "No?" She shook her head. Raindrops clung to her lashes, but her voice was steady. "I don't want your money." Ethan's jaw tightened. He was a man who solved problems with speed and efficiency. He had spent years building an empire where everything, absolutely everything, had a price. And yet, here was a girl, soaked to the bone, clutching nothing but a ragged blanket, refusing what most people would have grabbed with both hands. His chest felt suddenly heavier. "What do you mean you don't want it?" He caught himself before the word slipped out, "homeless." But she saw it in his hesitation anyway. She gave a faint, humorless smile. "Say it. You think I'm homeless? You think I'm desperate? You think I should fall at your feet because you opened your wallet?" The rain pounded harder. Ethan's grip on the bills tightened. "I just thought, you could use it." Her eyes softened, but not with gratitude. With pity. "You think money fixes everything, don't you?" The words stung in a way he didn't expect. He had heard critics, rivals, even family accuse him of being cold, of being mechanical, of hiding behind numbers. But coming from her, this stranger with nothing, the accusation felt like a blade pressed against the quiet part of his soul. He swallowed. "Then what do you want?" For a long moment, she didn't answer. She looked past him, to the blurred lights of the city stretching endlessly beyond. Then, quietly, she said, "I want something real." The silence between them grew heavy. Ethan stood frozen, his hands still half extended with the bills, but suddenly they felt meaningless, papers soaked in rain. Something real. The words sank into him, deeper than they should have. He had spent years drowning in deals, contracts, headlines, and yet he couldn't remember the last time anything in his life had felt real. The girl, Maya, though he didn't know her name yet, wrapped the blanket tighter around her shoulders and turned her gaze away, dismissing him with that single sentence. As if the billionaire, the empire builder, the man the city worshipped, had nothing she needed. Ethan lowered his hands slowly. The money, still untouched, slipped against the rain and clung to his palm. For the first time in his life, Ethan Carter had no answer. And that was the moment he realized, money wasn't enough. The rain had eased by the following night, but the city still smelled of damp asphalt and restless air. Ethan Carter sat in the driver's seat of his Tesla again, parked just beyond the flickering bus stop. He told himself he was foolish, that he had no business being there. Yet he couldn't drive away. All day, her words had gnawed at him, "I want something real." He replayed it during meetings, during calls, even while shaking hands with partners who congratulated him on his brilliance. It haunted him more than the billion-dollar contract stacked on his desk. For the first time, he felt the emptiness of his office walls closing in. Now, here he was again, restless, compelled, unable to resist the pull of the girl who had refused his money. She was there, just as he remembered. Maya sat with her knees drawn to her chest, the same thin blanket wrapped tightly around her frame. Her stillness unsettled him, but tonight, he noticed more, the way her lips moved faintly, as if whispering to herself, the faint tremor in her shoulders that no pride could hide. Ethan stepped out of the car. His shoes clicked softly against the wet pavement. This time, she lifted her eyes before he even spoke. "You again," she said, her voice flat but not surprised. He stood there awkwardly, a billionaire suddenly stripped of all the tools that had once made him powerful. I wanted to check on you." Her brow arched faintly. "Why?" Ethan hesitated. He didn't know how to explain it, that he couldn't stop thinking about her, that her refusal had unsettled the rhythm of his entire life. He shoved his hands into his coat pockets. "I don't know. Maybe because I can't figure you out." She gave a small, humorless laugh. "Maybe you're not supposed to." He sat down on the opposite end of the bench, the cold from the metal seeping instantly through his suit pants. He hadn't sat on anything this unforgiving in years. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The city hummed around them, the distant whoosh of cars, the faint buzz of streetlights. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "You never told me your name." "Maya," she said simply. He nodded. "Maya. I'm Ethan." Her lips quirked slightly. "I know. People don't exactly shut up about you in this city." The words should have fed his ego, but instead, they stung. People knew Ethan Carter, the mogul, but not Ethan the man. No one ever did. He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "Why did you refuse the money?" Her gaze drifted to the wet sidewalk. For a moment, he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, softly, she said, "Because money is what ruined everything." Ethan turned toward her, caught off guard. Maya's voice was low, steady, like someone reciting a story she'd locked inside for years. "I wasn't always here. I had a home, a family. My father was a contractor, worked himself sick trying to provide. My mother left when I was 12, couldn't handle the weight anymore. After that, it was just me and Dad, until one of those shiny corporations crushed his business overnight. They called it a merger, a market correction. I just called it the end. Her fingers gripped the edge of the blanket, knuckles pale. He lost everything. And then, he lost himself. A bottle replaced dinner most nights. I tried, I really tried, but one day he just didn't wake up. And the world didn't notice. The words fell heavy in the night air. Ethan's throat tightened. He didn't know what to say. Maya glanced at him, eyes glistening faintly but her expression firm. So forgive me if I don't believe in the magic of money. It took more from me than hunger ever could. Ethan sat back, shaken. He had heard stories like this before, statistics, reports, collateral damage of the corporate world he ruled. But hearing it like this, raw and unpolished, stripped him bare. After a long silence, he whispered, "Then what do you want?" Maya's eyes locked on his, sharp and steady. "I just want someone to sit with me. Not because they feel guilty. Not because they're trying to save me. Just sit, like I matter." The request was so simple, yet it hit him harder than any demand for wealth or favors ever had. Ethan Carter, a man surrounded by advisors, bodyguards, and millions of followers online, couldn't remember the last time anyone had sat with him just because. His chest felt tight, but he nodded slowly. Okay. So he stayed. Minutes stretched into an hour. They spoke in fragments, about the weather, about how Maya used to sketch in notebooks she no longer had, about how Ethan sometimes felt lonelier at galas than in his own apartment. There were long silences too, but they weren't uncomfortable. They were heavy with something Ethan had almost forgotten existed, presence. When he finally stood to leave, Maya didn't thank him, and he didn't expect her to. But she glanced at him as he walked away, and for the first time, her gaze wasn't guarded. That look stayed with him all night. And so he returned the next evening. And the one after that. Sometimes he brought her coffee, which she accepted reluctantly. Sometimes he said almost nothing at all. But each visit pulled him deeper into her world, a world stripped of luxury, where words mattered more than possessions, where silence felt truer than applause. It was their secret rhythm, a strange companionship neither fully understood. But secrets in a city like theirs never stayed hidden for long. One night, as Ethan sat beside Maya, shoulders brushing in a silence that felt almost fragile, a sharp click echoed from the shadows. He stiffened, glancing across the street. A camera lens flashed under the dim light before vanishing into the dark. Maya frowned. What was that? Ethan's stomach sank. He knew. The next morning, headlines screamed across every screen. Billionaire Ethan Carter seen with mystery homeless woman, who is she? The blurry photo of him and Maya on the rain-streaked bench burned through the media cycle like wildfire. And for the first time in years, Ethan felt fear. Not for his empire, but for what the world would do to the fragile connection he had just begun to build. The headlines spread like wildfire. By sunrise, Ethan Carter's name was splashed across every gossip site, every finance blog, and every social media feed. The untouchable billionaire with the mystery woman. Paparazzi circled his office tower like vultures, reporters camped outside his penthouse, and his phone buzzed non-stop with texts from associates, investors, and publicists demanding answers. He ignored them all. For once, Ethan wasn't worried about his stock price or the headlines. He was worried about Maya. When he returned to the bus stop that evening, she was already waiting, but not with the calm indifference he had come to know. She was rigid, the blanket pulled tighter, her gaze fixed on the wet pavement. You saw it, didn't you? She asked before he even sat down. Ethan swallowed. Yes. Her jaw clenched. I told you this would happen. People like me don't belong in your world. You didn't do anything wrong, he said, his voice firm, but the words felt thin against the truth pressing between them. He sat beside her anyway, ignoring the curious stares of passers-by. They don't know you. They don't understand. Maya turned her eyes on him then, sharp, tired, searching. Do you? The question cut deep. Before he could answer, a familiar voice broke through the rain-soaked silence. Of course he doesn't. Ethan stiffened. Standing under a nearby streetlight was Rachel Carter, his younger sister. Her blonde hair, pulled into a sleek knot, was untouched by the drizzle thanks to the black umbrella she carried. Her eyes, however, were cold fire. "Rachel," Ethan muttered, standing quickly. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same," she said, her gaze flicking to Maya with thinly veiled disgust. "Do you have any idea what this looks like? The board is in chaos. The press thinks you've lost your mind. And all because of her." Maya's shoulders tightened, but she didn't speak. Ethan's jaw set. "Leave her out of this." Rachel's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Leave her out? Ethan, you've dragged her into the spotlight of every major paper in the country. You've put Carter Dynamics at risk. Investors are panicking, lawyers are calling, and you're sitting here in the rain with," she paused, eyes narrowing. "A con artist." Maya flinched. Ethan's blood surged hot. "Don't you dare." Rachel's voice softened, but only with manipulation. "I'm protecting you. People like her see men like you as walking vaults. Don't be naive. She's playing you, Ethan." Maya rose then, her blanket falling slightly from her shoulders, her chin lifting with a pride that startled even Rachel. "I don't need his money. If that's what I wanted, I would have taken it the first night." Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned. Rachel sneered. "Or maybe you knew that refusing would hook him deeper." "Smart strategy." Ethan stepped forward, his voice low and lethal. "Enough. Go home, Rachel." But the damage was done. Rachel's words lingered, sharp and poisonous, even after she walked away, her heels echoing like a verdict. Maya turned back to the bench, wrapping the blanket tightly around her. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "She's right about one thing. I don't belong in your world, Ethan." He sat beside her again, forcing himself not to falter. "I don't care about worlds. I care about you." But even as he said it, a flicker of doubt gnawed at him. That same night, on the other side of the city, Maya's past came knocking. "Maya?" She froze at the familiar voice. She had been huddled near a closed cafe, waiting out the drizzle, when he stepped from the shadows. Lucas Hayes. Her childhood friend. The boy she'd once shared laughter with in sunlit classrooms, the boy who had seen her before life had collapsed around her. Now his face carried years of hardship too, leaner, sharper, eyes lined with weariness. "Lucas," her breath caught. "What are you doing here?" He stepped closer, searching her face. "I should be asking you. I saw the news." "Maya, what are you doing with him?" She shifted uneasily. "It's not like that." Lucas shook his head, his voice urgent. "It doesn't matter how it looks. You can't trust a man like Ethan Carter. His world will chew you up and spit you out. People like him don't see us, not really. You're just a story to him, something to make him feel less empty." Maya's chest tightened. The conviction in his voice mirrored the warnings in Rachel's. And yet, she remembered the quiet nights on the bench, Ethan listening to her without judgment, his silence feeling less like absence and more like presence. "He's not what you think," she whispered. Lucas's expression twisted with pain. "Then prove me wrong. But don't say I didn't warn you." The days that followed blurred into a whirlwind of tension. Ethan kept visiting Maya, but his world grew more hostile. Investors demanded explanations. His board threatened to intervene. Rachel called him reckless in meetings, throwing articles across the table. Meanwhile, Maya fought her own battle. Strangers passed the bus stop whispering, some mocking, some pitying. Once, a man even snapped a picture inches from her face before running off laughing. The fragile piece they had built was cracking. Yet, in the middle of it all, they still found moments. Ethan brought her coffee one evening, his tie loose, his face weary. He sat beside her, handing over the cup. You look worse than me, Maya teased softly, her voice breaking the tension. Ethan gave a hollow laugh. That's because you don't have a board of directors breathing down your neck. Her smile faded as she studied him. Why keep coming back, Ethan? You could make this all go away. Walk away from me and the noise disappears. He met her gaze steadily. Because when I sit here with you, it's the only time I don't feel like I'm pretending. The confession hung in the air, raw and unguarded. For a moment, neither spoke. Maya's eyes softened, and she reached out, just slightly, letting her hand brush against his. It was the smallest gesture, but for Ethan, it felt like the most real thing he'd touched in years. But the world wasn't done tearing at them. Late one evening, as Ethan left a board meeting with his phone buzzing relentlessly, he glanced at the latest headline flashing across every screen in the lobby. Billionaire seen with mystery homeless girl, is this his secret lover? The photo was clearer this time. Ethan's hand close to Maya's, the faintest suggestion of intimacy. Gasps echoed around him as employees craned to see. Cameras flashed the second he stepped onto the sidewalk. And Ethan knew, the collision wasn't coming. It was already here.